Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and in today's video, we're gonna talk about pre-listing home inspections. Sellers frequently ask me, Zach, should I get a pre-listing inspection? In other words, should I as a seller, pay for an inspection of my home prior to putting it on the market? Now, I'd say this question's a little complicated. There are pros and there are cons, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. I'll share some of those with you and I'll leave it up to you to make the decision on whether it makes sense for you to get a pre-listing home inspection. Now, I will preface this all by saying that buyers that I'm working with really do enjoy when sellers have already purchased an inspection because they can see that inspection and get informed about the property. And in a competitive market, when homes are selling quickly and lots of buyers are wanting to purchase it, they are sometimes more apt to submit an offer when there's a seller paid pre-inspection already done because they don't have to put that money out up front. So with that being said, I'll share some advantages and some disadvantages of getting a pre-listing home inspection. I have 6 advantages for you. Number 1, you get to discover the condition that your house is in. Now, a lot of sellers are slightly nervous about the inspection process. They don't know what they don't know. And so if you've lived in the house for some time and it's been a while since you purchased, you probably haven't inspected all of the major systems in your house. So what you can do is have an inspector come in and essentially do a full home inspection like they would do for a buyer with photos and also consult on some of the items. They're going to look at the systems and structure of the house. They're going to look at the windows. They're going to look at the HVAC. They're going to look at the electrical. They're going to look at tons and tons of stuff. They're going to get into the attic and the crawl space. And as a seller, it's nice to know what's going on in your house. After receiving the report, you're going to know what major issues there are, what minor issues there are, and you'll be able to dialogue with your real estate agent about those issues. If it's me, we'll have a conversation about what makes sense to fix and what maybe is lower priority on your list. And we can help prioritize your spending and investment so that you can maximize the money on the sale of your house. Number 2, you have the opportunity to proactively make repairs. Now, in the home selling process, there are typically buyers that are going to do an inspection on your house. And if you haven't done an inspection ahead of time, those buyers are going to be finding things wrong with your house. They always do. But in that case, it's reactive, and we're reacting to what's being presented to us. So the flip side is to do a seller paid pre-inspection ahead of time so that you know what's going on with the house. You can address certain issues if you want or not and be in control of that process. You can choose your contractor, you can get multiple bids, you can even do some of the work yourself. But if we are reacting to it and the buyer is asking us to take care of the work, most likely they're going to want to choose who the contractor is and also have it done by a professional. Number 3, we can price the house most accurately. As a real estate agent, one of my jobs is to help sellers determine the list price for their house. And the one thing I always talk about is there's a value range for your house, and ultimately it's worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. And one of the ways that we can help narrow this range down even further is by having a pre-inspection done. And the biggest challenge is trying to find that sweet spot of where a buyer's willing to offer, and maybe even multiple buyers, but then you as the seller are excited to get that money as well. So if we have a seller paid pre-inspection, we're able to see what issues there are, address some, not address others, and at the same time know more accurately what adjustments might need to be made to the price in order to reflect the work that still needs to get done. Number 4, we can minimize the traffic in your home. There are likely going to be lots of people coming to take a look at your house with their real estate agent, touring it, and making a decision if it's a house that they want to pursue further. And a main due diligence step that buyers are taking in hot markets like Seattle is doing a pre-inspection themselves. And if 10 buyers decided they wanted to do a pre-inspection, which does happen on some homes in the Seattle area, Now you have 10 different people coming back again with their inspector, spending an hour or two in your house, going through everything, and you're gonna have a lot more possibility for damage and just exposure to whatever is going on at the time. So I would say that you do potentially limit the amount of times people are coming into your house by getting an inspection done early. It doesn't eliminate it completely because buyers still have the opportunity to inspect if they want, but you can minimize the number of those buyers that will elect to get an additional pre-inspection. Number 5, you can improve buyer confidence. One thing I know as a real estate professional working with buyers as well is that home buyers, specifically first-time home buyers, are fairly nervous about what they're getting themselves into. Not only are they thinking about the costs associated and the process that they're going through for the first time, but they're also thinking about the house itself and what future problems or issues might arise. So one thing as a seller you can do is get this pre-inspection done before listing your house to help buyers feel more confident about your house versus other houses. The buyers most likely will see your report, and if you have proactively addressed some concerns, or even if you haven't and there aren't issues, you are showing the buyers all of your cards. You are providing them with the information they need to make the best decision possible for them, and that is going to give them confidence to either move forward with your house or not, but at the same time, you know that those people moving forward are serious. And what I've found is that the seller paid pre-inspection before listing your house is going to potentially attract more offers because buyers aren't going to need to do their own pre-inspection necessarily. Again, they can, but they might elect not to do that. And it also saves them time to put together that offer and also be competitive. That's also a fear. Buyers are afraid that if they don't do a pre-inspection and they don't have time to do it, it's not worth making an offer. But if you've provided that pre-inspection for them, they can now be confident and make an offer with terms that are favorable to you. And going with that, you are potentially limiting the number of contingencies or opportunities for a buyer to back out by providing this pre-inspection before listing. The pre-listing home inspection doesn't eliminate the possibility of further inspections by the buyer, but it does limit the number of buyers that will elect to include an inspection contingency. Finally, the 6th benefit of a seller pre-inspection is the potential just for a smoother transaction. Now, in a real estate transaction, there's often some back and forth negotiation at the beginning, but also during the inspection period. So if you get your home inspection done ahead of time, you are potentially eliminating any further back and forth negotiations about the price and the terms of the contract, but you're also eliminating any surprises about inspection items that came up later. Now let's flip to 4 potential negatives of a seller paid pre-inspection. Number 1, the cost. As a seller, typically the buyer is paying for a home inspection, and it's going to cost somewhere between $300 and $700 depending on the size of the house. Now, majority of them are going to be in that $300 to $550 range. If you're the seller, you're now if you, as the seller, decide to pay for this inspection, you're now taking on that cost. As we talked about, there are advantages to taking on that cost, but the negative is that you are taking on the cost. The second disadvantage of a seller pre-home inspection is the possibility that an inspector is going to notice something that maybe the buyer's inspector wouldn't have pointed out. I wouldn't say this is a huge risk, but each inspector has different gifts and different things that they focus on. So it's possible that the inspector you use would maybe point out something different than the buyer's inspector, and now you're fixing something that might not have been an issue in the first place. Number 3, and I'd say this is the biggest potential disadvantage of the seller home inspection, is that you will discover new or hidden issues that you were not aware of previously. This leads into number 4, which is the seller disclosure requirement. And as a seller, you have an obligation to the buyer per state law, and it's different in every state, but in Washington state, you provide a 6-page document to every single buyer that lists out defects in the home. And it's focused more on the big defects, not the little cracks in the sidewalk or things like that, but it's focused on those bigger issues. And as a seller, if you get that inspection ahead of time, you are now bringing on potential new things that you need to disclose. And we've talked about in the benefits of ways that you can address those concerns ahead of time. But if you weren't planning to address those things or didn't know about them and don't want to deal with them, now you are putting the burden on yourself to present that information to the buyers. And the easiest way to do that is going to be to provide that inspection report. And most sellers will get that pre-inspection report and make it available to buyers as a supplement, essentially, to their disclosure. All right, so we've talked about lots of benefits of a seller-paid pre-home inspection, and we've also talked about some potential negatives of the pre-inspection. And I'll leave it to you to decide if it makes sense to get that pre-inspection before listing or if it makes sense to let the buyer do their own due diligence. Thanks so much for watching this video on seller pre-inspections. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some value out of it. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel for more videos like this. And if you know somebody who could benefit from it, please share it with them.